Harambe YouTube, it's Charles here with a Nerd News Now update. And it's not the type of video I really want to do, but it's something that has been big the last 24-48 hours in the nerd news cycle. And it's something that affects something that I love very much, which is professional wrestling. Now, if you are an adult professional wrestling fan, you know what professional wrestling is. And if you watch as much professional wrestling content as I do, you understand certain things. And myself, I am also an entertainer of sorts. I don't wrestle, I play music. And with the Raja Jackson situation where he intentionally injured a professional wrestler at a independent wrestling event because he felt disrespected, there's one thing that people are not talking about, and that's etiquette. What I mean by etiquette, I'm sure if you know, if you're a musician, if you whatever niche group you belong to, there's certain unspoken rules, unwritten rules that you abide by. You know, as a musician, you don't bring your girlfriend to rehearsals. You don't bring strangers into the green room. You don't. I mean, there's so much stuff you do. If you miss a note, you keep chugging along. And nothing is ever bad when you're on stage. And if you follow, like I said, as much professional wrestling as I do, you know that there are certain things that are unspoken because professional wrestling has changed to where before it was everybody knew it was staged, but they didn't understand how. But now virtually every wrestler has a YouTube channel, a blog, and they talk about the ins and outs of what they do and professional etiquette. And where this situation started was before the show at Knokx Training School. They were a WWE affiliate. And we'll get back to that later because it is relevant. But at that school, they were putting on a show and they were in the backstage area. Now, people take for granted that backstage means a green room, something that you would see all stars get. But in independent wrestling, you're not going to have a big venue. You're not going to have couches and fancy places. Their green room was the back parking lot of the club they're working at. As a musician, a low-level musician, my green room, my backstage is often my van. But every wrestler, you know, they say the first thing that you learn is that when you're backstage, on any level, you shake everybody's hand. And you don't lead conversations. And unless you're one of the boys, you don't go back there. But if you're not a wrestler, if you're a young wrestler, you respect your elders. You take their advice. It doesn't matter what's going on, and you shake everybody's hand. And so, a lot of people think the situation started when the wrestler, Psycho Stu, I can't remember his real name, but they thought that everything happened when he hit Raja with a can. But really what set these things off was a major breach of etiquette. One, a fellow wrestler brought a non-wrestler into the backstage green room area, which was the parking lot, where all of these wrestlers were getting ready. So that was a violation of the etiquette. And when this professional wrestler brought a guy back, the guy came in cocky, didn't shake anybody's hands, and he was talking junk saying that he was looking for so-and-so, and he was looking for so-and-so, and, he's putting on a demeanor of somebody who was supposed to be there, even though he wasn't recognized. And on top of that, this person who was introduced into a private area, who didn't shake a hand, who came in cocky, also came in with a camera crew. This gentleman was live streaming, but the wrestlers didn't know that. And so if they see somebody coming in who they do not know, and Stu, Psycho Stu was a 15-year veteran of this particular independent promotion. And so he is considered, at the higher end of the totem pole. And so for a person to get in his face and Psycho Stewie, he walked over to him and he's like, you don't need to worry about this guy. You need to worry about me. I'm Psycho. And the guy, he says, you know who I am? And the guy says, no, I don't know who you are. Pretty much blowing him off. He's like, well, I'm Psycho Stu. And what he did then was when the guy continued to puff up his chest, he got an empty can, either a soda or a beer can, and he swung it at this person who was still not introduced. But he swung it at him, and it appeared, as it was supposed to appear, that it hit him in the back of the head and exploded. But if you watch carefully, I mean, not even carefully, but what Stu does is he grabs the can, and just as it's about to touch the back of the Raja's head, he crushes it dramatically in his hand so that liquid flies out and you get a crunch sound of the can. And so it looks like, and it sounds like, from a distance that you hit a guy. And there was no contact because Raja didn't flinch. He didn't move. He didn't get on guard. He looked angry and confused. Now, why would this 15-year veteran do that? Like I said before, because of the breach of the unspoken contract, and this wrestling school is a WWE ID affiliate. At least they were. And so they know that they're going to be sending out WWE ID talents and using this place as a farm system. So you see a guy with a camera, expensive camera set up, a whole crew around him, coming into your area acting like a professional wrestler and getting in your face. You're going to work, meaning put on a show and be in character. And so when that happened, another subtle thing I saw is people were saying, why did Stu put his hands on him? What Stu did was, and again, I'm not a wrestler, I'm not an insider, but just from watching years of wrestling, if you look at the motion Stu did, it wasn't, and it looked odd out of context, but when matches start, guys go for what they call collar and elbow, where one hand goes on the collar, one hand goes on the elbow. And that's how they initiate matches. And so what Stu did, because he was confused, immediately after the soda can, and the kid was looking at him, and Stu was like, aren't you going to sell? Meaning, aren't you going to react like I really hit you? And you can tell at that moment, Stu thinks he's dealing with another wrestler who is not doing his job. And so then he asked in another subtle way if he's a wrestler or not, by putting, not aggressively, but putting his hands in the collar and elbow position. And as soon as Stu gently put his hands in those positions, and Raja did not react in kind, he realized he was not dealing with a professional wrestler, and immediately apologized, shrieked back, reached his hand out for a handshake, and tried to explain the situation. And people were like, well, the guy shouldn't hit him with a beer can. He didn't hit him with a beer can. And the guy was coming through cocky, didn't shake a hand, didn't have any respect. He came into the locker room of these wrestlers acting like a top guy. And like I said, with WWE ID system, these guys are probably thinking, well, are they sending this kid here for something? Is this camera crew with WWE? This guy, he's a 15-year veteran of this territory, and he's thinking, well, maybe these are WWE cameras, and I have to put on a show for these guys. I may not make it to WWE, but at least I want them to know who I am. And so everything gets settled down here, but then beyond the breach of etiquette, I noticed that Black Pearl, who is part owner of the wrestling school. He calms Raja down, saying, during his match, we'll have you do a run-in and get a receipt. And what that means is if somebody accidentally tags you too hard or does something they're not supposed to, you tag them back a little, or you do something to let them know, okay, hey, that was out of line. But Raja isn't thinking that. He's a guy who he felt like he got punked. And he wasn't hurt because he even said, the can didn't hurt. And if you watch the video, like I said, he didn't get hit with the can. It was an illusion. But his ego and his pride was hurt. And so when this person who was co-owner of this wrestling school said, well, you can get in the ring during his match and we'll do something out and we'll make it work. Then he walks over to Stu, shakes his hand, and he starts feeling good knowing that he's going to get his receipt, but they even let him know what a receipt was. And all of this is documented. He was live streaming it. The whole thing is up on Raja Jackson's live stream. And really, another breach of, they're letting this guy into the wrestling world, expecting him to know terminology and etiquette without talking him through it. And so, as he's backstage, he has his friend, AJ Mana, or whatever. He's the guy that was wearing the cowboy type costume. He's the guy who brought him into this situation in the first place. And he was telling him, oh yeah, you can hit him back a little bit harder. And he's really getting in this guy's head and gassing him up, and not at all trying to protect Stu or anybody else. It felt like this AJ guy saw Raja as his ticket to something bigger, because he was just kind of gassing him up, and said, well, you go out there and you tag him. And if he doesn't like it, I will go out there and I will jump in. And so Raja is feeling like, okay, this is my time to get revenge, to heal my bruised ego. And AJ was saying, okay, you can get your receipt, which is different than getting your lick back, which is the phrase that Raja used to get his lick back. And what that meant was, like I said, to make up for his embarrassment and to step out of line. And the whole time, between the can incident and the brutal attack, it was a couple of hours. And the whole time, they put Raja on the front row to let him know you're going to run in at this time, do a double leg takedown, and start, working some punches. They keep saying work a lot, and they don't know that a lot of people that don't follow wrestling don't know that work means to pretend, to fake. And so they're expecting Raja to go in there, do a double leg, put Stu down safely, get a few fake pops in. Stu was going to act like his world was ending. And they were going to make Raja look like $1 million. But what happened is, during the live stream, and you can see it on Raja Jackson's live stream, is he is sitting there in the front row getting heated and steamed. And he's reading the comments out loud. People are calling him a B word. They're saying he's not tough. They're saying they don't think that, he ain't going to do nothing. He's like, well, I'm going to do something. I've always wanted to hurt a wrestler for real. And he's getting more and more angry. And then he says something that's weird. He's like, well, how many subs will I get for a knockout? What if I just knock him out? They said I could knock him out. They said I can go as hard as I want to, which none of that was true. His friend AJ was gassing him up, but none of the wrestlers said to go in there and violate their friend Stu. And so the time came. He got his cue. He went into the ring, did a double leg, but instead of, with the double leg takedown, getting him up, you could see the Psycho Stu, the wrestler, assisted in getting up on his shoulder, making him look like $1 million. And when he went to throw Stu, it wasn't a regular professional wrestling throw. It was a violent throw, and even when Stu tucked his chin and put his arms out, the velocity was too much for him to protect himself. And so his head basketball bounced off of the mat. And Raja immediately jumped on him, though he was unconscious clearly from being tossed violently to the ring, and punched him 10, 20 times. No work punches. These were violent, brutal, deadly intent punches. And they got, it took wrestlers, 5 or 6 of them, storming the ring to drag this man off of this man who was unconscious, who he still hit 20 something times, and was trying to fight off 5 people to get to him. And I've heard a lot of takes, I've heard a lot of bad takes, and people were saying, well, the can thing was out of line, that's what started it. No. What was out of line was this AJ Mana guy bringing in an uninitiated non-wrestler into the backstage area and not teaching them the etiquette. Not telling them to be humble, to shake hands. That, these guys may joke with you. And because of that breach of etiquette, Psycho Stu, a veteran, dealing with PTSD, is sitting up in the hospital, intensive care. And a 25-year-old Roger Jackson, who had, I would say a promising MMA career because of his father, Rampage Jackson. But his MMA career was just getting started. Now he's looking at likely prison time. And so that's my take on it, is that there was a breach of etiquette from the wrestlers that just built and built and built. And a lot of times when you say, when you get into these situations where you have these unspoken rules and why does it matter, that's why it matters. Because a breach of a social contract will not always go to the level of somebody getting injured, but it can. So that's my thoughts on the situation. And I cover this to kind of give a little perspective, because I see a lot of people saying, well, the wrestler should have known better, or this or that, and it's really making wrestling and MMA look bad. And I think at a time where we have so much great stuff happening with AEW, WWE, GCW, multiple mixed martial arts promotions, and these things being as popular as they have been since the 90s, this is something that could really stop that momentum. And, back 20 years ago, UFC was looking, they considered it a blood sport. And they considered wrestling fans classless rubes. And we are in risk of going back to those times. I would say unfortunately, but no, fortunately, WWE ID pulled the partnership with this wrestling school, which is fair enough because they did not protect the wrestler. And they don't want to be affiliated with things like that. The guy shouldn't have been backstage, and he definitely shouldn't have been in the ring. So that's my thought. You guys be easy, keep it positive, and remember that for every dumb incident in wrestling, there are thousands of brilliant moments. So don't let this ruin it. And I'll see you guys next time.